There is a house in Norfolk that Harry knows better than almost anywhere else on earth, Sandringham, the red brick estate where the royal family gathers every Christmas, where his grandmother spent her final years, where his childhood Christmases happened, the stockings, the walks, the family gathered around the table in the way that only families who have known each other across generations can gather, where, by every account, some of the happiest and most ordinary moments of Harry's extraordinary life took place. He wants to go back. Sources say he has expressed that hope clearly. He would like to bring Meghan, he would like to bring Archie and Lilibet, who are 6 and 4 years old, to the place where their father grew up. He would like his children to sit in the same rooms he sat in, to walk the same grounds, to know their grandfather in the way that grandchildren deserve to know the people who love them. And King Charles, according to multiple well-placed sources, is not ready to say yes. The question I want you to sit with as we go through this story today is not whether the palace's hesitation is justified. The question is what it costs everyone involved, not just Harry, not just Meghan, but Charles himself, when the answer keeps being not yet. If you have followed this family for any length of time, and I suspect many of you have been watching this story for longer than the headlines suggest, then stay with me, because this particular chapter is one of the most human and most complicated the royal story has produced in years. And if you are new here and you want this kind of honest, careful storytelling about the royal world, I would love for you to subscribe. One tap. It means the world. Let me build this picture properly, because context, as always, is everything in a story this layered. Harry has only seen his father twice in 2 years. That sentence bears repeating because it is easy to lose its weight in the rush of headlines. Twice in 2 years. A father and a son who live in the same world, who move through the same public spaces, who share the same grief about the same woman, Diana, and who have managed through the accumulated weight of memoir revelations and legal battles and quasi-royal Australia tours and carefully managed magazine covers to reduce their contact to twice in 2 years. The most recent of those 2 meetings was in September 2025. Clarence House. Tea. 50 minutes. Harry described the visit afterwards with the careful hopefulness of a man who understood the stakes. He said his focus over the coming year had to be on his father. He said he did not know how much longer Charles had. He said the visit had brought something closer. And then the months passed, and the Australia trip happened, and King Charles came to America for a state visit, and California was not on the itinerary. And now it is spring 2026. Harry hopes to come to Britain later this year for the 1-year countdown to the 2027 Invictus Games in Birmingham, the games he founded, the project that connects his military past to his humanitarian present, a trip that has genuine purpose beyond anything commercial. And he would like an invitation to Sandringham. He has said so through friends. He is waiting for a word from his father that would, in one practical stroke, solve a problem that has made every potential UK visit complicated, because an invitation from the king would automatically provide Harry with the security package he needs to bring his family safely to Britain. Without that invitation, the security question, who pays, who provides, at what level, remains unresolved and deeply uncomfortable. A friend of Harry put it simply. If he was invited by the king, he would get a package of security that automatically kicks in. He would love that. Would he go? It would depend who was there. If the king was to say, come up and spend some time with the family, he would love that. And here is where the story takes an unexpected turn, because Charles's response, filtered through a friend of the king, speaking to a respected British newspaper, was not warm. It was not a closed door, exactly, but it was something quite specific and quite pointed. The friend said that if Harry truly wished to see his father, he would do well to encourage his supporters to allow such matters to be discussed privately, since low trust and bitter experience in this regard remains one of the principal barriers to progress. Low trust, bitter experience, principal barriers to progress.
These are not the words of a father who is simply too busy. These are the words of a man who has been hurt, who has watched private conversations become public ones, who has seen family moments, however small, appear in subsequent interviews or books or documentaries in ways he did not anticipate and did not authorize, who has, by every account, a genuine desire to repair the relationship with his son, and an equally genuine fear of what repair, conducted in the vicinity of Harry's public operation, might ultimately cost the institution he is now responsible for. And this is the part that most coverage of this story has missed entirely, because most coverage frames this as the palace rejecting Harry, the royal family shutting out the Sussexes, Meghan being denied access to the Norfolk estate. But the picture that emerges when you sit with all of the available information is considerably more complicated and considerably more sad. One royal writer, described as someone with long-standing access to palace thinking, made an observation that has stayed with me since I read it. He said King Charles must balance his desire to see his grandchildren and repair the rift against his caution about the monarchy being used to promote commercial projects. His grandchildren. Not Harry, not Meghan, his grandchildren. Sources say that Charles was genuinely moved by the limited time he spent with Archie and Lilibet when they came to Britain for the Platinum Jubilee celebrations in 2022. A source close to Charles said at the time that it had been wonderful for him to see his grandchildren. And a royal writer who knows the palace well added something that I found quietly devastating. He said he believes Charles is genuinely missing out there, and regretting missing out. A grandfather, regretting missing out on his grandchildren because the conditions around any potential visit have become too complicated to navigate. That is not a villain's story. That is a tragedy. A quiet, very human, very specific tragedy that is playing out behind the headlines about snubs and rejections and royal fightbacks. Now, let me be honest about the condition that is complicating everything, because it is specific and it is important, and most of the coverage has reduced it to a headline without giving it the careful examination it deserves. The condition, according to royal commentator Richard Palmer, is essentially this. Charles is reportedly reluctant to invite Harry to Sandringham this summer if Meghan uses a UK visit to launch or promote her lifestyle brand as ever. The king, Palmer said, will not want to be the backdrop. He does not want to appear to be endorsing a commercial launch, and the timing will be important. This is not an unreasonable position when you understand why the palace is sensitive about it. If Meghan brings as ever to the United Kingdom, if the jam and the candles and the lifestyle brand arrive in the same trip that takes Harry to Sandringham, then photographs from that visit become, however indirectly, marketing material. Sandringham in the background, the King's estate, Meghan's brand. The association does not need to be stated explicitly, it only needs to exist. And Charles, who has watched the Australia tour very carefully, who noted, along with his advisors, how the hospital visits and the charity engagements and the humanitarian moments became intertwined with trademark filings and AI fashion platforms and wellness retreats, does not want Sandringham to become the backdrop for the next chapter of that same story. That is a legitimate concern. I want to say that clearly, because the people watching this who feel that Harry is being treated unfairly deserve to hear the other side presented with honesty. But here is what makes the situation genuinely heartbreaking when you hold all of it in your mind at once. Charles wants to see his son. He wants to see his grandchildren. He has said so through people who know him in terms that are not diplomatic or managed but simply true. He is a father and a grandfather who is 77 years old and has been treated for cancer, and who understands, as Harry himself has said publicly, that time is not guaranteed. And the barrier between what he wants and what he feels able to offer is a lifestyle brand, a jar of jam, a candle with a children's royal title on the label, the commercial infrastructure that Meghan has built around their joint identity, an infrastructure that follows them everywhere they go, that turns every hospital visit into a shoppable outfit and every family occasion into a potential brand moment. That is what stands between a grandfather and his grandchildren.
Now, let me be equally honest about what stands between Harry and the reconciliation he says he wants. Sources close to the palace have been specific about what would need to change. The first is trust, and trust, in this context, means the confidence that a private moment will remain private, that tea at Sandringham will not appear in some form in a subsequent interview or documentary or book, that Harry's account of a family gathering will not become, as his account of so many family moments already has, a public document. The spare memoir inflicted wounds that have not healed, specific, named, detailed wounds, the account of a physical altercation with William, the characterization of Camilla, the description of moments that the other people in those moments never agreed to share. Charles reportedly told confidants that some members of the family will never forgive Harry for writing it, and while Charles himself appears to lean toward reconciliation rather than permanent estrangement, the architecture of trust that private family life requires has not been rebuilt. The second barrier is the security question, and this one is practical rather than personal, but it matters. Since stepping down as working royals, Harry and Meghan no longer receive automatic taxpayer-funded armed protection from Scotland Yard. Harry fought a 3-year legal battle over this and lost, and the prospect of a UK visit to Sandringham, to Birmingham for Invictus, anywhere, requires a security arrangement that is not yet resolved. Click on Detroit. An invitation from the king would solve that problem, which is why Harry is waiting for one, and which is, perhaps, why the palace is cautious about extending one without conditions, because an invitation carries implications beyond the weekend it covers. And now there is a third complication that has arrived in the last week and changed the shape of everything. King Charles came to America. He addressed Congress. He had tea at the White House. He attended events in Washington and New York and Virginia, and Harry and Meghan were not included in any of it. Not the King's Trust reception in New York, where the guest list reportedly included Anna Wintour and Martha Stewart, not any private tea, not any quiet meeting, nothing. Sources say a private meeting in New York was discussed, and then the Australia trip happened, and the palace saw the optics and pulled back fast. One source said simply, that trip killed it. So now the Sandringham question sits inside a larger context of increasing palace distance, the New York meeting that did not happen, the California that was not visited, and the summer invitation that has not been extended. 3 closed doors in the space of a few months. And I want to return now to the question I asked at the beginning, because I have been building toward it, and I think it deserves the most honest answer I can give. What does it cost everyone when the answer keeps being not yet? For Harry, the cost is visible in the words he has already spoken publicly. I do not know how much longer my father has. Life is precious. I would love reconciliation. These are not the words of a man who has accepted the distance. They are the words of a man who keeps reaching toward something and keeps not quite being able to close the gap. For Meghan, the cost is different and in some ways more complicated, because the barrier that stands between her family and Sandringham, the lifestyle brand, the commercial operation, the as-ever jam, is a barrier she built, not with the intention of keeping her family from a grandfather, but with the intention of creating financial independence and professional identity in a country that was not always welcoming to her. And the fact that those two things are now in conflict, that the independence she built is part of what is keeping the reconciliation at arm's length, is a tension that I do not think has been examined honestly enough. And for Charles, the cost is the one that source described, a grandfather regretting missing out,
A father who wants to see his son and his grandchildren, and who is holding back not because he does not love them, but because every previous attempt to get closer has produced complications he did not anticipate, and damage he did not choose. He is a man who must balance love and duty simultaneously, who must weigh what he wants as a father against what the institution requires as a king, who must decide whether the photograph of Archie and Lilibet at Sandringham is worth the risk that the photograph becomes, however indirectly, an as-ever advertisement. That is a decision most of us have never had to make, but the feeling underneath it, the feeling of wanting something and being unable to reach for it without conditions and consequences and careful consideration, that feeling is entirely human and entirely recognizable. Sandringham is a house in Norfolk, and right now it is also a question about what reconciliation actually requires, about how much damage a family can sustain and still find its way back, about whether the commercial decisions made in California and the institutional decisions made in London will ever create enough space between them for something as simple and as important as a grandfather spending the summer with his grandchildren. Nothing has been formally confirmed. The Sandringham invitation has not been extended or officially refused. The Invictus countdown trip has not been scheduled. The as-ever launch timeline in the United Kingdom remains unknown. But the shape of where things stand, the New York meeting that did not happen, the California that was not visited, and the low trust and bitter experience that a king's friend named as the principal barrier, that shape is visible, and it tells a story that no official statement has needed to confirm. I would love to know your thoughts, whether you think Charles is right to hold the line, whether you feel Meghan's commercial operation is genuinely the barrier that sources describe it as, or whether, setting aside all of the institutional calculations and the brand concerns and the palace optics, you find yourself simply hoping that a grandfather and his grandchildren find a way to spend some time together this summer.